Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Why Football podcast with me, Michael Dryden, and Etches Adokru. Today I am very pleased to say we are joined by Mark Mann-Bryans. Mark is a sports journalist for the Press Association, mainly covering Arsenal and England. He is joining us for this special episode reviewing Arsenal's dramatic transfer window, a window that culminated in the late deadline day signing of Thomas Partey. So Mark, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, chaps. Thanks for having me on.
No, absolutely. It's a pleasure. I thought I'd start then, and before we go into Arsenal, with a bit of background about yourself. So if you'd like to tell us about your career today, that'd be great, Mark.
Yeah, no worries. I studied media and sports journalism at Huddersfield University. Graduated, I don't really want to say how long ago it was now. It was 2000. I've been working for PA since late 2010, covering Arsenal for the last 5 years. So yeah, it was interesting to see the end of the Wenger years and then the muddle and the issues we've had since. But yeah, it's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to cover Arsenal from that perspective. Obviously, with Wenger's reign coming to an end and having Freddie Ljungberg and Arteta, so it's very interesting. I've seen your name pop up on a few publications. So can you tell us a bit more about PA Sports? You can go ahead and just tell us, but I've seen your name pop up on a number of publications. I was thinking, is this guy just the busiest guy, the busiest journalist?
Yeah, sadly I don't get paid every time it pops up somewhere. So PA Media, we have news, sport, showbiz. You know, we cover everything. It's part of the sport wire, so we provide content to websites, to local newspapers, to national newspapers. Anyone that subscribes to our wire. So that's why it pops up here, there, and everywhere. So the more I see it pop up, the more it means people are happy with what I'm doing for my job.
Yeah, that explains a lot, because I saw your name pop up in a few local papers and I was thinking, is that kind of like an outreach from PA? And I take it then you are an Arsenal fan or not?
I am not.
Huddersfield fan?
I am not.
Good.
One more guess, mate.
Sunderland?
Former Manchester United season ticket holder.
Ah, okay.
In my younger years.
Interesting.
I mean, I think their window and Arsenal's windows were the two that everyone really had their eyes on Monday, weren't they? So.
Yeah, no, it definitely was.
Yeah, so good for the intro, Mark, and obviously glad to have you on. So moving on to Arsenal's transfer window, obviously we've spoken about it before, and I haven't stopped smiling since yesterday or 2 days ago evening, because of the Partey deal. So the question I kind of wanted to ask you is, where did Arsenal kind of want to strengthen this summer, and kind of did they achieve it? So that there are a few signings they brought in, which we'll get onto.
I think Mikel Arteta got in there. You know, he had a few knockabout signings in January. You know, we saw people like Cedric Suarez, Pablo Mari come in. They always felt a bit like they were, with all due respect to those signings and those players, a little bit of papering over the cracks and just what they could get their hands on at the time. I think the plan heading into this window, you know, we lost Raul Sanhili, left the club, so that again, there's never a quiet day covering Arsenal, but they got pretty much what they wanted in terms of trying to fix the spine of that team. You know, Mikel Arteta's put his faith in Bernd Leno as his number one, as we know, but he's then brought in Gabriel Magalhaes from Lille, and he is, you know, he just looks like a powerhouse. He looks like the kind of defender they've been calling out for years. You know, for non-Arsenal fans, having a bit of a joke at Arsenal's defence is, you know, we might start running out of punchlines soon. So that's quite interesting. And I think Thomas Partey was, you know, they've been after him for more than just this window. He's been a bit of a project, a long-term project, stretching back even before Arteta joined the club, really. So, yeah, you know, I think they'll have been delighted to get it done. I know it went a bit to the wire, but we can go in a bit more in depth into that if you like, as to why I believe that to be the case. But yeah, you know, I think all in all they've had a great window.
Yeah, so kind of we'll get to Partey last, because that's the big finale, isn't it? But when I think earlier in the summer, we're looking at Willian joined around just after the FA Cup triumph. Was that an area, or was he a player they particularly identified, or was it more he was seen as an option for an area of the pitch they were looking to strengthen? So his name kind of cropped up a bit later.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Most top clubs will know the contract situations of players at other top clubs, and I think it became apparent that it was a bit of a will-he, won't-he kind of situation with Willian signing on at Chelsea again, wasn't it? So Arsenal were across that. I think they gave him an attractive offer. They gave him a lengthy contract saying how old he is. But it's this mentality of they brought another winner into that dressing room, haven't they? I'm I loathe to say critic, but I'm yet to see the massive fuss about Nicola Pepe. I think, he shows flashes. I thought he came on at the weekend and was great. He played well towards the end of last season. Has he justified that price tag? Not in the slightest, in my opinion. But Willian is just, he knows the league. He knows how to win trophies. He's very consistent. I think Mikel, you see Saturday when they actually went on to win the game, Willian was playing more as a number 10. Whether he ends up playing a system that includes a number 10 moving forward, I'm not quite sure. But it is just getting Willian in is, it's almost, if you can afford it, a player like that, it is almost a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, there was that issue over, it was a 2-year, 3-year thing, wasn't it? I think Chelsea were offering 2 years and, Arsenal came right in with the 3-year deal, which some fans were a bit anxious about. But as you said, it has that winning mentality brought in. It adds that experience, that consistency, which perhaps Pepe has lacked slightly alongside the other options that they have wide. If you look at maybe Reece Nelson and obviously Martinelli and Saka, who are much younger. Moving on to the next one who you touched on earlier is Gabriel, who, as I'm an Arsenal fan, which I'm sure you know, he's one of those players that I didn't really see Arsenal heavily linked with at the start. I think he was really close to joining Everton back in March time. And then obviously COVID hit and it went quite quiet. And then all of a sudden it went back up again. And then Arsenal were lurking in the background. Early indications have been he's been a fantastic signing. So what are your thoughts on him generally?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he might have been another one that was a name on a list almost. You know what I mean? I don't think he'd have been completely unknown to Arsenal. I think he's a player they would have been tracking for a while. And then when you suddenly see that a deal is possible and affordable and amenable to all parties, you act on it. And I think, there was apparently late interest from Manchester United and a few other places. But I think once those early links were made and they'd reached out and were in contact, Gabriel was always aiming to come to Arsenal. And, he's come in, he's a young guy, his English isn't great, but he's almost already a leader in that defence. Now, I know a lot of people aren't a fan of David Luiz. I think to have, it's similar to Willian. I think it's good to have him around. I think on his day he can be great. But if you just look at Saturday when Arteta went back to a back four, Gabriel was the boss of that back line. So to go into a team and to be happy to command that area of the pitch despite having a player next to you who's been there, seen it and done it all for good and bad, I think speak volumes. And he's an absolute machine by the looks of things. It's not a mistake that they've gone out and looked at a player with his repertoire, with his physicality and things like that and decided that's what they need. They love to play out from the back. Every team does really now. But you still need that absolute almost monster of a centre-half that's not going to be afraid to challenge these forwards that we've got in this league at the moment.
I completely agree. I think he's had a few challenges. So he had Mikel Antonio, which is, a very physical test, which he came out and did quite well in. And then on Saturday, on the weekend, Sunday, he went against Oliver Burke, who is also a bit of a powerhouse himself. And I think he's handled himself pretty well. He's been quite solid. It's interesting as well because of the number of centre-backs Arsenal do have. I think it's seven or I'm not going to go out and count, but it's quite a few.
More if you have people like Rooney and Kolasinac, it gets up to about 10, I think.
Yeah, it gets to a fair few. So it's interesting how they prioritise bringing him in, regardless of the outgoings, which centre back was non-existent apart from Mavropanos. So moving on to the big finale, which is my favourite, as everyone knows, Thomas Partey. So we spoke about it before. How did you? It seemed as if everyone was disappointed and felt like no one was going to come in. I think you were one of the very few that said there was still a bit of hope there. Were Arsenal always confident, or was it like a late change that they realised something could still be done there?
It is a good question. I think without knowing the inner workings, it's hard to say they were confident. But the difference when you look at a party to a Hossam or which I still can't properly pronounce, but I think they knew exactly what they had to pay to get Thomas Partey. They knew that they could negotiate for that whole window with Atletico. And if push came to shove and they were, making sure they didn't want to sell, they had an option to go there and pay that release clause. That's what they've had to do. They've probably paid more than they wanted in the current climate. And, much has been made about them making people redundant and things like that. So I'm sure they didn't want to pay the release clause, but the reason it went down to the last day is probably because they knew that they could. Why not? Why show your hand before? You could argue they could have had him in for the first few games, but if you then can land him for 15, 20 million pounds less later in the window, then you kind of have to chance your arm that could happen.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and yeah, it brought a lot of excitement to deadline day. Kind of talking about the players, you mentioned one of them, and David Raya is another one. Is those are two players, Uwar and Raya, which they failed to bring in. Could you shed any more light as to potentially why they weren't able to be brought in or who they're meant to replace? So I know that Arsenal brought in Renarsson as a goalkeeper as well, but at the time it seemed as if both were linked at coming at the same time, and Uwar and Partey, there was rumours about both of them coming in. So I wonder if you had any take on those two.
Yeah, I think Uwar related. I think it's just Lyon. There isn't that release clause there. Lyon were strong in what they wanted for the player. And I also think Arsenal couldn't afford both him and Partey without clearing players out, which they really struggled to do. They've got players on a lot of money there that don't play much football. Socrates, I think, has he even played this season? I'm not sure. And, he's on roughly £100,000 a week. So why is the club suddenly going to say, I know, we'll take him on loan and, we'll pay? It's just not going to happen, is it? So they struggled to clear bodies out when I think they thought they could do a better job of getting rid of Torreira for a fee and Guendouzi for a fee, and probably at the start of the window, El Nene for a fee. And, I know they got their 20 million for Martinez, which no matter what you think of the back end of last season is a great bit of business for a goalkeeper that club did not really rate up until a year ago, probably less. So, yeah, I think that's what happened with Aouar. I think they would have needed to make more sales to get it over the line. That's not to say they won't go back in the future. And I think the same applies to David Raya. I think I would be massively surprised if he's not linked with Arsenal again next summer, especially if Brentford don't come up. He's very highly rated, especially by Inaki Kana, who's the goalkeeping coach at Arsenal, who also selected Runnison. He's known of Runnison for a long time. Little's known about Runnison. He was second choice at Dijon when he joined Arsenal. I think from what I've heard internally, Arteta has made it clear that he wants to play one goalkeeper this season, which I think is why I think is why Martinez left. I think he realised the chances weren't going to be there. You look at the League Cup side, Leno's played both games. Will Runnison get a chance in the Europa League? You'd imagine, hopefully so, in the early games, because the last thing you want is a man who hasn't played any games suddenly drafted in if Leno gets injured and his debut comes in the North London derby or, Man City or something like that. So I think Runnison will play, but I think he has very much been signed as a backup option. Arteta doesn't have what you would say two first choice goalkeepers now like he had before. I think it's very much seen that Leno will play all of the games that are deemed necessary to win and get results in, and Runnison will be slowly drip fed in to give him experience for if and when he needs it.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, moving on to outgoings then. My first question was going to be, why have Arsenal struggled to move players on? You've touched on that quite extensively there. But one player I don't think was mentioned too often is Saliba. And now I heard that Saliba, so obviously he came from St Etienne last season. He was meant to be loaned. I think it was Project Restart, and was meant to be loaned back for when they had their cup final, which didn't materialise. And they were due to loan him back this window, but seemed to fall short due to an admin area. Do you think he'll end up out on loan? And if so, where do you think?
Yeah, it's a strange situation. It's also a very sad situation for a young and talented footballer. He was signed last year for £27 million. He's a teenager. I think if that had been this summer, I know it's easy to say, he would have probably stayed at the club. You look at Gabriel this year. The idea eventually, you'd imagine, would be to partner them both. But Gabriel's come in and managed to get straight into the side and hit the ground running. William Saliba's had issues with injuries last season in France. The season was cut short because of the coronavirus. So he made 17 appearances last year when Arsenal would have been hoping it would almost be 3 times that if possible. There was a bit of toing and froing with Saint-Etienne about extending the loan so he could play in the cup final, but how he would train around that cup final. So he ended up missing that and having to come back to England. I understand his mother has passed away recently as well, which, he's a young guy in a new country, so that must be horrible. Then Saint-Etienne came back in for him. They've pointed the finger at Arsenal for why that loan didn't go over the line. Like I say, I think they said it was an admin error, which in this day and age is hard to believe. I tweeted out the other day and got a story yesterday that they are now looking at the possibility of sending him out on loan to the Championship. You've got that window from Premier League to EFL is open until the 16th of October. And if they can find the right fit, which I think is key, you can't just send him to any club in the Championship. You need a club that plays a little bit to the style that you want to play, that's not going to expose him and almost damage his confidence if he's getting battered about every week and they're losing every week. So I think that is one that could happen. I think a lot of people will question how on earth this has happened, but he might come. It might in 3 years' time. We might be saying, "Oh, do you remember when he went on loan to Norwich, for example? We thought it was the end of his career, but in 3 years he's in the heart of that defence with Gabriel. So he's a slow burner, basically. I think.
Yeah, and perhaps a stint in England might be good for him and his development. It won't be the Premier League, seemingly, but having a stint in an English club in the EFL will at least introduce him to the style of football that does typically you tend to get in England, away from some of the better sides.
Exactly.
Brentford would obviously be, as you said, he's mentioned that his mother's passed away recently. He's just moved at a very young age. Perhaps someone like Brentford could be a good shout, given that it's quite, proximity-wise, it's quite close. So that could be a good shout. But as you're right in saying, style of play is so crucial for a loan deal. Chelsea are very selective where their players go out on loan, and it's for a certain reason. And moving away from Saliba then to someone who's not been mentioned yet and has been in the press a lot for non-footballing reasons is Mesut Ozil. What do you think they'll do with him, or is there a chance they might reintegrate him?
No.
Kind of expected that.
Yeah, I can't see that happening, to be honest. Mikel Arteta gets asked about it on a regular basis, and he's very happy to not talk about it. We'd love to be a fly on the wall when those conversations taking place, I'm sure. It's my understanding Mesut Ozil won't be named in their Europa League squad, which is a strange one because you'd think that would be a good opportunity to give him some games to, get him back through that. Almost again, if you're going to end up needing to rely on him, then you want him to be fit and ready to play. But it really does look like he's just going to be cast aside. Whether that's we had a meeting with Edu a few weeks ago, and he said it's all about performance and training. Whether you can believe that, I think there might be more to it than that. I think he rocked a few boats when he refused to take the pay cut with his other teammates. And I think long term, he's got no future at that club whatsoever.
And what's your take on the Gunnosaurus scandal? And seemingly, it seems like Ozil's doing this to spite the club. Could be wrong, I'm speculating.
I was talking to a few of my colleagues about this yesterday. I think the Gunnosaurus one is an interesting one because the guy who plays him has been made redundant, but he had other roles at the club that were not necessary without the fans. So, I can understand the club having to take that difficult decision. The idea was always that Gunnosaurus would be at games once it's up and running again, whether it's Jerry who's wearing the costume or someone else. But I think you're right. I think that's a bit tongue-in-cheek by Mesut to almost have a poke at the club. I saw he was the only player that wished Lucas Torreira well on his loan deal. Matteo Guendouzi on his loan deal, which is someone that, wasn't exactly flavour of the month at the club. So, yeah, you do wonder if he's just stirring that pot a little bit. And, he's got nothing else to do with his time at the moment, is he so on?
Yeah, you often see footballers turn to social media for these sort of antics when things aren't going in their favour. So moving on to a player that's a lot closer to first team affairs at Arsenal in Alexander Lacazette. So he's got 2 years left on his deal. What do you expect the future holds for him? Do you think he'll be sold next summer? And if so, who do you think could replace him?
It's a difficult one because you'd say in the normal world, yes. A very respected colleague of mine, James Ollie, wrote a piece saying that Arsenal wanted £40 million for him, which no one's going to be paying that for him at this moment in time, are they? I don't think. He's a very good striker. I think Mikel Arteta's got him playing a different sort of game. He's happy to drop off and things now. that means he isn't going to score as many goals. But if you can add to the team and you've got someone like Aubameyang who's scoring all the goals, then, the figures don't always back up what's happening on the pitch either. But I do think next summer they may look to move him on. I suppose it also ties in with how Eddie Nketiah develops as a first-team striker, whether he can develop into that Premier League marksman that they would need to replace him. I don't really see the point in selling Lacazette to then have to go and buy a like-for-like replacement. So it might be a case of they try and raise the funds for other players, other areas of the pitch by selling someone like Lacazette and then putting faith in Nketiah, or we might see Aubameyang move back through the middle like we did at the weekend.
Yeah, so we're talking about the strikers. One question I have of an outgoing is someone that some Arsenal fans may know who I've followed quite closely is Balagan, who he's one of those guys. I don't watch the youth ball for Arsenal, but every time I see a clip of him, it's him with a mazy run and then finishing it coolly. And I'm aware he was linked to the move away to some high-profile clubs, but he's remained. I think he's got 1 year left. So do Arsenal expect him to depart as well?
If you believe what's been said, then yes, I think he doesn't seem to have any intention to sign a new deal. That's not to say that he won't. I think there's every chance that he might. But it does seem at the moment he will leave the club, which again, like you say, is a great shame because he looks great when you see clips of him. Obviously, they lost Sam Greenwood to Leeds United recently as well, didn't they? So they'll be keen not to keep letting these young players slip away, especially because the pathway to the first team at Arsenal seems to be a lot clearer than it is at a lot of other top clubs.
It's a sore point, Sam Greenwood, for myself as a Sunderland fan. Picked off by Arsenal for under the Triple P for about, I don't know, a few 100,000, sold for 2 million. But that's it. I won't say any further on that.
What about so we touched on Saliba going on loan. What about some of the other first team youth players? So I think Nelson's window's kind of gone in terms of potentially going on loan, but this Smith Rowe, I know he was on loan at Huddersfield the end of last year. Joe Willock potentially. Do you reckon any of those guys could go on loan to EFL clubs, or would they just stay with the first team squad?
It's a good point. I think especially Smith Rowe and Reece Nelson. I think they'd have much preferred Nelson to have gone on loan somewhere in the Premier League, which obviously is too late now. Smith Rowe more likely could go back to the Championship again. I know he had a great year at Huddersfield in a side that was struggling. So I wouldn't put anything past there, especially if he's not going to get the chances at Arsenal. You have to balance it out, don't you? Maybe they might look to play him a bit in the Europa League this year, and then he'll go out in January. Get through the group stage of the Europa League where you can play a few of these younger players, and then send him out again in January.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be good for them. I'm quite concerned that you've got a few players in certain positions that aren't really going to get the game time. Obviously, Saliba is potentially one of those, Smith Rowe, etc. And it'd be quite good to see them play, grow, develop, etc., and then come back raring to go next season. So we discussed the ins and outs of Arsenal and who's come in and Arteta, but I kind of wanted to focus a bit more on the man himself. I think when he was hired at the time, it didn't raise eyebrows because he was heavily linked, but at the time, the club was in a bad way. We had the Xhaka incident. We weren't winning. I think we had that streak of no wins in 8 games. It was just a mess, really. And, it takes a very specific type of character to lift that and to galvanize a club in such a way. So I kind of wanted to ask you a bit more about what you've kind of got from Arteta as an actual person.
I agree. It's a great question. He is... He's great with the media in comparison to someone like Unai Emery. He doesn't always give away what he wants to give away, but he can have a bit of a giggle. He can have a bit of time where he will give you information he wants to give you. But in terms of managing that team, I don't think, looking back now, there was a better choice, was there? I don't think any Arsenal fans would have wanted Jose Mourinho. He's gone to Spurs. Long term, short term, I should say, that might prove to be a stroke of genius, but. You always felt Arsenal needed someone there that was going to, I know it's a cliche to say they understood the club, but to also be there for the next 4 or 5, 6 years, build this team, get them back into the Champions League and craft a team in their own image. And that wasn't Unai Emery. I don't think it'd have been Jose Mourinho, but it very well could be Mikel Arteta.
Yeah, no, I think a really good comparison actually for you is Carlo Ancelotti versus Mikel Arteta, because I think at the time they joined at very similar times, and they were both obviously, well, Arteta was hired at City, but I think Ancelotti was at Napoli leaving, and there's a big clash because you had the established Champions League winner potentially past his best versus the completely unproven Pep #2, as he was highlighted. And I think, to be fair to Everton, they've actually won all of their games. But I think I was about to make a comment, and realistically, Everton are flying pretty high. But I think you're right. Arsenal did make a good choice with Arteta in that sense. What his pull is what really draws me. So his influence is said to be huge with the Aubameyang deal, as well as the Saka deal, as well as the Martinelli deal. I think Gary O'Driscoll, the club doctor, said he wanted to stay on because, of Arteta. Do you get that kind of vibe from him, that he has this sort of attraction to him to pull everyone together?
Absolutely. I think every single person at that club, well, like I say, every single person, there will be some that haven't because they've been put by the wayside a little bit. But nearly everyone there has bought into what he wants to do and bought into it in a big way. That's why you can attract someone like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, to sign a new deal when you're not in the Champions League, when there's no obvious guarantee that you're going to be in the Champions League. So you need a pull of a manager, and to be able to get that pull and to get people to buy into what you're doing, despite this being your first managerial job, I think just shows you that is the making of the man, isn't it? He knows exactly what he wants and he can get people involved.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree with that. I was a bit disappointed with the departure of Freddie Ljungberg. Was that inevitable? Was that kind of a thing of old versus new, where he was there before Arteta, and then Arteta kind of wants his own style?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think Freddie did a job. He wasn't happy towards the end of that small window where he was the manager, that he wasn't allowed to put a team in place. You can understand why, I suppose, because he wasn't going to get the job full time. He then became, he was a coach under Arteta, but you kind of felt he was always on the periphery of it. Arteta brought in all his own men, the men he wanted to help craft this image. And Freddie Ljungberg wasn't one of them. I also think he had a little taste of management and wants a bit more now, rather than being sidelined in a coaching role that, was almost just this position of being held at the club as a statesman more than actually getting involved in the day-to-day work, by the looks of it.
Mm. Yeah, because I'm aware that this summer, aside from the signings of, Thomas Partey, Gabriel, etc., Arsenal have also brought in Andreas Georgesson, Miguel Molina, and Carlos Cuesta. Andreas Georgesson, I'm not too sure if too many fans know, but is of particular interest to me because he's a set-piece coach. Now, that obviously is music to my ears, because sometimes in the past we've been susceptible to set pieces, and I think that would be something that Arteta's quite highlighted. But do you have any more information on the other two that have come into the club and what their roles kind of are?
I mean, it's a strange one, actually, because the club are really reticent to explain their positions. It was easier with guys coming in from other clubs where they did similar roles, but even Mikel himself has kept his cards very close to his chest about his coaching team and what each of their individual responsibilities are. It's a strange one, because you think, well, no one's going to copy that plan or anything like that. But no, so to be honest, I don't have much information, because not much information has been put out there.
Yeah, it's like one of Arteta's best kept secrets. To kind of to bring Arteta to a close, maybe it's because I'm in dreamland at the moment with how badly things could have gone and how positive that they've gone in the end, or so far, culminating in the FA Cup win. How special do you think Mikel Arteta actually is? So is this a case of someone that potentially, could outgrow Arsenal and go even further in his career to maybe other clubs? Or, will he get found out as time goes on? Is he the real deal, is the question I'm asking you?
I think it's a great question that, maybe we should clip this bit up for in a few years' time. I think at the moment he was the right man at the right time, because that club was, in a state of almost disrepair, wasn't it? But he came in, knew the club, knew what he wanted to do, was almost breathed fresh air into it, didn't he? Probably because he didn't have the baggage of other jobs as well. Winning the cup was great. The league performances were a bit hit and miss. 8th position's not good enough, is it? And the Europa League exit to Olympiacos was very much brushed over once they won the FA Cup. So I think he needs a good season this year. Not necessarily not needing a trophy. I think it's hard to say you should win a trophy every year at the moment when you look at the opposition that's around there. But he will want to be a lot closer to the top 4. He'll want to have a better run in Europe. And he doesn't need to. I don't think he's going to lose his job if that doesn't happen this year. But he personally wants to see progression, especially having pushed so hard to get the players that he wanted, to bring it full circle, to get the players that he wanted during the transfer window.
Yes, yeah, I think you raised a really good point. The Olympiacos game, I was there. So I deleted it from my memory, and then it's come flashing back. So yeah, I think that there were some disappointing moments. You mentioned he wouldn't lose his job if he didn't finish too well this season, but I guess the aim would be Champions League football. We're aware that they have made some significant signings for players that scream win now or succeed now, in signing Aubameyang, Willian, Thomas Partey. If they didn't get Champions League football this year, would it be seen as a disappointment collectively? I don't think he'd lose his job, but would that be seen as a general disappointment?
Yes, I think so. Again, whether that's right or wrong, I think it would be seen. I think it's still seen every year as a disappointment, even though that top band of clubs keeps growing in numbers. Every club will be disappointed if they don't finish in it. Manchester United would be disappointed. They have been in the past. Arsenal would be. Tottenham would be. Chelsea would be. It's a bit different, I suppose, for your Leicesters and your Evertons, who would love to be in the top 4, and it would be a bonus. But there's 6 or 7 clubs into 4, just doesn't go, does it?
No, absolutely not. And as you said, that kind of pool of teams that you consider now to be mainstays in the Premier League, or at least the elite in the Premier League, is seemingly growing. So even with sides like Wolves and Leicester vying for those Europa League spots, and we saw Leicester vying for a Champions League spot last season. As you said, there's 4 spots, and now you feasibly have, if you include Leicester, you've feasibly got 7 teams that are going for those positions. And with Chelsea and Spurs actually also engaging in squad building exercises, and to a good degree. I mean, Spurs have now got quite a good squad behind them, and don't get carried away with recent results as much as we don't get carried away with 1 year under Arteta. But it's just becoming so tight. Like, it's so tight to get that 4th spot, and winning the Europa League could actually be the only solution to that if the league becomes untenable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. Lest we forget, Arsenal won't be in Europe at all this year unless they'd won the FA Cup. And that was a great day, and it's a great competition that they've been successful in for many, many years. So you can't diminish the fact they even lifted the cup, but you can, I think, look at the fact that they would have missed out on Europe if they hadn't won it. So what it means from that perspective as well is equally important as just finishing in the league.
Yeah, I think that's kind of come to the end of the discussion, really. You touched on some great points, Mark, about Mikel Arteta, Arsenal, Thomas Partey. I've tried my best not to celebrate too much about that because there's a big coup as well, but more so about Arteta in general. So thank you for your insight, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Mark.
No worries at all. I'll speak to you soon, hopefully.